Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about how I'm killing my second startup and doubling down on my first startup. The general idea is with my first startup, ArtsyPetz, I quickly made about $600 in revenue within maybe a month or two, and I did the very cool thing of looking at that and deciding, hey, why not go build a second startup and ignore that little bit of success? So I built the second startup. That's the one I'm killing. And we're going to talk about the details and how I got there to hopefully share that story out a bit. Since I'm a data engineer and a data scientist and just general data nerd, I'm going to start by talking about what the data told me. The data very clearly said that I had no users, free or paid. My Google Ads campaign didn't have any conversions, and my cold outreach attempts had basically zero engagement. First, let's talk about the no users. That's technically not true. I did have a handful of users, but it never really amounted to anything. Those users were more or less people who I knew in my network who signed up to take a look at the product and ultimately didn't decide it was for them. There was some interesting feedback that I got. There was some bits where people said, hey, this is cool, but that's not for me. Cool, fair, not so much I can do about that. There were other people who were very open when they said they do something similar, but they already do it with ChatGPT or Claude on their desktop apps, and they weren't interested in paying for a solution because it wasn't a problem worth paying for. So that's legitimate feedback, of course, and there were things that I could have done with that feedback, and I ultimately decided not to. The second piece of data was the Google Ads campaign results. I had a Google Ads campaign that I was running for maybe a month-ish, and that didn't lead to any conversions, meaning nobody found my ads that I had on Google, clicked on it, went to the website, signed up, and then paid. Nobody even signed up, if we're being totally honest, never mind the paying part, and that felt like a pretty good signal. There is something that I do want to say about the Google Ads campaign, and a mistake that I learned from, hopefully you can learn from it, is the Google Display Network. So at the beginning of my ads campaign, I was seeing what I thought were great results. There were impressions, meaning the ads were showing up when people did a Google search. People were clicking on some of those too, which is great. When I looked at the analytics to tell me which websites the traffic was being driven from, it was very weird websites. I still don't quite remember the names of them, but none of them really made any sense. It wasn't something you would look at and say, oh, I've seen that before. So, being the nerd I am, I decided to dig in a little bit, and it turns out there is something called the Google Display Network. For those of you who aren't exactly sure what the Display Network is, an example of which is you look up a recipe online and you go to the website to look at the recipe. At the top and on the sides and at the bottom of the website, there are ads. That is the Display Network. So the Display Network ended up having really low quality traffic. Basically, any traffic that came through that landed on my website, and it really didn't do anything. So I was paying for that and it wasn't converting. So I decided to shut those off, even though they were the majority of my traffic. Once I shut it off, traffic obviously died down, and that didn't seem like a good reason to keep moving forward. The results weren't there. The third piece of data is the cold outreach. I was doing cold outreach to Substack writers with growing newsletters, and there was basically zero engagement. I would reach out to people, and the only responses that I would get was more or less thanking me for the compliments I gave them. When I spoke to the problem I was solving, they weren't interested at all, and that's fair. So for all of those data points, there are things that I could have done more. I could have done more outreach in different places. I could have redone my ads campaign or tried to enhance it to get better results. And I could have tried to work on that feedback from those very few users and make some improvements on the product. Ultimately, I didn't think that made any sense because there was no initial interest in the product itself. Said another way, nobody said, oh yes, I am having that problem, and this solution isn't exactly what I need, but I could use something like it. Had I got a piece of that feedback, that would help me understand, okay, cool, there's something here, there's a thread to pull on and to keep moving forward. but there wasn't, and I didn't want to end up in the sunken cost fallacy. Just because I had spent whatever number of hours working on Ripple that I have, it didn't mean that I should spend more hours. I ultimately wanted to stop as early as possible so I didn't overcommit myself. Another thing to note is the emotional investment that you can have in a startup, and I want to more or less avoid that as much as possible. I don't want to continue working on something just because I'm emotionally attached to it. If there's no business reason to continue moving forward, then I'm not going to move forward. It is also worth pointing out that my first startup, ArtsyPetz, like I had mentioned before, made something like $600 within a couple months, and basically I did no effort at all. I did no sales and marketing. Anything like that was just non-existent, but it still made money. So I'm decided to double down on that to see how far I can carry that. That initial piece of revenue helps to tell me that, hey, there are people interested in the thing that I built. So let's talk about what I'm doing with ArtsyPetz. I went through the website and I fixed a whole bunch of bugs, because the goal of any website is to make it as easy as possible for someone to spend their money on your business. And those bugs were not helping me with that. Those bugs were causing a problem, even so much so that I would have people that I know message me and say, hey, I tried to make a purchase, but it didn't work, which is the absolute worst thing that you want to hear when you build something like that. So I went through and I fixed up a bunch of those things to make it as easy as possible for people to spend their money and for me to generate revenue. The vast majority of the product offering for ArtsyPetz is physical products. The business creates custom Renaissance style pet portraits and prints them on sweatshirts, t-shirts, tote bags, mugs, and as wall art, like as a framed piece of art you can put in your house. So I was flipping through Instagram and I saw that there was a vendor event at an indoor dog park near where I live. And I decided, hey, let me reach out and see if they'd be willing to have me be one of their vendors. And cool news, they did. So that's a whole lot of stuff that I've been working on. I've never done, let's be honest, I've only built 2 startups so far. I've never done a vendor event. I've never done a physical event, never done any of this. So this has all been a whole lot of learning, where I've been having to think about, what do you do with a physical table? Which sounds like such a stupidly simple question, but how do you decorate it? What do you do? Where do you get the table? Do I have a table? Do I have a chair? All these kinds of little details, and I've been focusing on that a lot. So some of the approach has been, what do I decorate it with? So I decided to print out things like a QR code, a couple examples that I have right here. So these are like examples of the portraits. Let's see how that looks like that. Pretty cute, stuff like that. And I have them on these stands so they can just stand up and I can kind of place them all along the table. And that ends up being just one thing. There are a bunch of other things that I'm trying to figure out too, but that's been pretty interesting so far. There's the social media postings that I've been trying to do for that, with the idea being, okay, can I generate interest by posting up to the event, posting during the event, and then posting after the event. Basically a little mini social media campaign that I'm trying to work on as well. One thing that I'm really excited about is the opportunity to network at this kind of event. I don't know how feasible this is. Everyone's going to be busy trying to sell their stuff, and I get that. But also, I'm going to be in a room with 25 other business owners, and that seems like a pretty good opportunity to do a lot of networking. To just chit chat with these people and figure out what problems they're having, how they deal with them, stuff like that. If it can generate other ideas to make a new business, sure. But that always seems like a worthwhile investment of my time, and hopefully I can do that at this event. Now that I've basically killed Ripple to double down on ArtsyPetz, it's been an interesting space to exist in mentally. The decision to kill Ripple wasn't negative for me at all. Sure, it wasn't ideal that I built a business that didn't generate any revenue. That's also, I think, part of the game. You're not going to hit a home run every time, and I'm okay with that. I also learned an insane amount building Ripple. I mean, there was so much that I learned, and those are lessons that I can take moving forward for anything else I decide to build. The Google Ads campaign, the cold outreach, Those kinds of smaller details that are non-technical and very business focused, I learned that because of Ripple, and that feels really good to know moving forward. Also, ignoring ArtsyPetz was not a good idea. I'm still kind of shocked that I put myself in a position where I made $600 pretty quickly. I then ignored all that profit to then build something new that was ultimately not going to make me money. I think deep down it had to do with my fear of sales and marketing. A part of me recognized that pretty quick move to $600 in revenue and decided to ignore it because the next logical step was sales and marketing. Once you have enough people saying, hey, I will spend money on this, you have a rough idea that, okay, maybe I should do this a little more. How do I get this in front of more people? How do I get them to spend more money? Which is basically the very definition of sales and marketing. But if I were to do that, I would have to put myself out there. That was the possibility for rejection to happen. And I don't think I was ready at the time for that. I'm still probably not 100% ready, if I'm completely honest. But I'm a little more ready now that I had those experiences through Ripple. So life works out in funny ways, and this is just an example of that. There's also something to be said for shiny object syndrome, where I built something and I was familiar with it and I wanted to do something new, and I ran over to that. That probably wasn't a good idea either, but oh well, these are the lessons that I'm learning along the way. The ones that hurt are the ones that I end up valuing a little more. In some weird way, maybe I had to kill Ripple to realize that I needed to double down on ArtsyPetz in the first place. So that's it. Thank you for watching. Please feel free to comment. Please like and subscribe because that makes a gigantic difference for someone like me. And hope to see you on the next one. Bye-bye.